Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Sequoia the Tech Fairy. And if you're new to my channel, you actually should be because this is my first YouTube video and I'm so excited. So, if you don't know who I am, I help entrepreneurs scale their marketing through systems that actually convert. What does that mean? I basically help brands, consumer brands, SMBs, creator led brands grow their business when they get traffic so that they actually can get sales. Okay. So today I'm going to talk about these 7 marketing secrets that people really don't talk about too much. So this is not going to be, hey, you should post at this time or you should use this specific hook. This is going to be specifically about what you should be doing to drive that traffic and then convert those leads, specifically when it comes to your business. Okay. So, first things first, most businesses quit too soon. What does that mean? Essentially, when you are starting to grow your business and you are starting to become visible, that could be content, that could be blogs, that could be cold calling, that could be cold emailing, that could be literally inbound and outbound. You need to be visible. When somebody comes across your website, across your content, and maybe this is the first time that they're seeing you, they're not going to purchase right away unless there is some insane deep pain point or transformation that you have connected with them about. And we'll get to transformations later. But 9 times out of 10, it takes them a little bit of warming up to you because they need to trust you. So there's something called know, like, trust, and that factor needs to be accounted for when your customer is making a decision, right? They know you, they see that content, or maybe they see an email, or they get a cold call from you. And then they're like, okay, I like this person. I like what they're talking about, and then eventually they trust you enough to spend some money with you, right? And so that's essentially the first mistake is people go, oh, they didn't purchase on the first time that they saw me. They must not want anything. And that's actually not true. It usually takes anywhere between 6 to 8, sometimes 10 touch points before somebody says, hey, I actually want what you're talking about. Okay. So the second thing is people need to see you many times before they buy. So that kind of talks or goes back to what I just spoke about in terms of it's not about just the first or second time. They need to see you multiple times. So maybe you called them and then they passed, or then you followed up later. And again, you want to have a nurturing sequence when you're following up. You don't want to just like say, all right, they didn't want the thing. You want to have some type of way to continue to follow up or at least give them more value. Gary Vee says jab, 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 right hook, right? So that's more value that you're essentially giving them before they, decide and make a decision. So value, 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 and then the ask is how you make sure that they're seeing you without asking right away, right? Of course, you have your offer, and if they're super attracted to the offer, then they're going to take action anyway, but give them value first and they will convert or take that action. And in many cases, you might think it needs to be over a long period of time. It could literally be in a very short period. It could be in an hour, right? Like you could watch this video and decide there was enough value that you're ready to take action. But those touch points are things that I'm giving you from a value perspective that you're like, hey, I really actually enjoy this person, learning from this person, and I can get value from them. And let's just say you have a service based business. Hey, I've seen them around. I really like what they're talking about. I really like the services I've seen that they're offering, and I want to take them up on that offer, right? So it doesn't necessarily mean that they need to wait or you need to wait for 8 touch points, but just know that it can take sometimes up to 8 touch points, right? So the third thing, this one is a big one. If people are confused, they're not going to buy. People buy based off of clarity, right? And so the clearer you are about your offer, your product, your service, the easier it is for them to say, hey, I really want this thing. So, what we usually do in the tech world is called usability testing. And what we'll do is we'll kind of comb through a website and see how clear your product or service is when it comes to your website, right? When it comes to your messaging, when it comes to portraying whatever it is that you're trying to sell, your offer. And usually it's not that clear. You may think it's clear, but it's usually not that clear to the buyer, right? And I've had this happen to me. I've had people do usability testing on my site and be like, Sequoia, this isn't that clear, right? Because what we feel like in our mind is clear doesn't necessarily mean it's clear to everybody else. So I definitely suggest that you do that if you haven't, so people understand, okay. So you understand rather, okay, this person is getting it or it's just not clicking for them, right? The next and fourth secret is you cannot talk to everybody at once. I know we think broad, we're going to sell to everybody. Everybody's going to want my thing, right? You need to be talking to one specific person, almost down to the point of like, giving that person a name. It's called a buyer persona, right? You want to give that person a name. You want to know their demographic, their psychographic, where they go to school if they're in school, where they go to work if they're in work, where they go to church if they're in church. What do they do in order to move throughout their lives on an everyday basis? And where does your product or service fit into their life? So the more that you can talk to one specific person, the better off you are. So it's one thing if I got on here and be like, I help everybody figure out their marketing. It's like, no, I help small, medium businesses figure out their marketing, right? You see how very specific that is. And in some cases, I can be even more granular with that. I could be like, I help small, medium businesses for women over the ages of 25 who have generated over $300,000 in revenue with their businesses. That is very specific. But if I'm talking to that very specific person, the people who are in that psychographic or that demographic are going to understand and click way faster than if I'm saying, hey, I help everybody with their marketing. It could be, the Fortune 500 or the SMB. No, it needs to be very, very, very specific. Okay. So, our fifth secret is people buy who they want to become. Now, this is a good one. This is talking about the fact that people want a transformation. So they don't necessarily need to be in pain all the time. We talk about the vitamin versus the painkiller. They're going to kill a specific pain, right? But they also want a transformation. So maybe I see a fitness guru online and I'm like, whoo, them abs are ripped. I want those abs, right? I'm more likely to buy from them because I want to look like that person. So if you're not solving a specific pain point, just know that people will buy a transformation. Okay, so the sixth secret is proof matters more than promises. So if I can promise that this is going to happen, but you don't see any proof, you don't see any testimonials, you don't see any social proof, like you're not seeing comments to say, hey, I tried that, I tested it, whatever, the likelihood of you purchasing from me gets lower and lower and lower, right? So you got to hear people raving about my products, people raving about my service, right? Before you're going to be convinced to go and want to try that product or service. So if you don't have testimonials, get those testimonials on your page right away. The other thing is, I have a client that I'm currently working with, and she has amazing testimonials on Google. So if you haven't gone and set up a Google business profile, make sure you do that because you want to bring those testimonials in so that when people go search your business, your product or service, they see that you have 5 out of 5 stars on over 200 plus reviews. Like the likelihood of somebody wanting to purchase from you is extremely high. Okay. And our seventh and final secret is you have to pay attention to what's working. So, a lot of people are not testing, they're not tracking, they're not measuring, they're not looking at the analytics to see what is actually working for the business, right? You may be putting up a ton of content, you may be using cold emails, you may be using cold calls, you may be who knows what. But if you're not measuring and tracking to see what is converting, then you are wasting your time. You need to understand very, very clearly what is converting for you. All right. So, those are my 7 marketing secrets. And if you want to understand if your website is failing your business, go ahead and click the link and sign up for my masterclass. And if you like this type of content, go ahead and hit that like button and subscribe. And I will see you next time. Bye.